the government budget. Now there's another way that we do this as well. It's a much bigger way. The second way is using debt instruments and mortgages and commercial paper. So mortgages is what we want to focus on here because that's what we deal in, mortgages that are attached to real estate. In this example, we're going to have the same players. Well, no, we're not. We're going to have the Federal Reserve Bank, a local bank. We're going to have a bank depositor and a borrower. Someone wants to borrow money on their property. Now, in this example, we've got the depositor here, and Joe's done a great job. He did real good in the Senate, so he closed a couple deals, and he made himself $10,000 for this example. So he's going to take his $10,000 check, he's going to walk it over to his local bank, he's going to deposit in his money market account. Everybody see that? So we got a regular depositor sticking $10,000 into his bank account. Now that bank, because it's a license of the Federal Reserve, have an agreement with the Federal Reserve. That agreement is that the banks, any bank, can borrow up to 12-to-1, which means however much cash they have on hand at any given time, it's called liquidity, however much cash they have on deposit, they can go take that cash on a daily basis to the Federal Reserve and borrow 12 times that amount of money, up to. Good banks borrow 4 to 6 times the amount of money. Bad banks borrow up to 12. Really, really bad banks like Bear Stearns, they found out did 1 to 200 times the amount of money they had on deposit. That's why they're no longer here. 40-to-1, Merrill Lynch. I mean, there's a lot of them out there that have happened, but the rule is 12-to-1. So now the Federal Reserve would then, because the bank has a $10,000 on deposit, he would go to the Federal Reserve Bank and say, hey, I'm ready, I got 10 grand, I can borrow 12 times that amount, or $120,000. So the Federal Reserve would extend a line of credit to the local bank for $120,000. So the Federal Reserve has lent to one of its banks, an institution that's licensed with it, 12 times the amount of money it has on deposit, so they've got $120,000 line of credit basically from the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve charges that local bank Fed funds rate. Fed funds rate, guess what it is? Does anybody know what it is right now? It's a quarter of 1%. 1/4 of 1% annualized interest. So they can borrow $120,000 using somewhat leveraged by someone else's money, the depositor's money, any dollar in any bank or institution or trading account or institution of any kind can go to the Federal Reserve, market 12 times that amount of money at right now at 1/4%. So prime is what? You may know. 3.25% right now. So if you've got prime rate, you're charging 3.25%. So now the bank's got $120,000, and let's say that this borrower, Lawrence, picked out this wonderful house for herself, and she goes to her bank, and the bank says, you know what, you're my best prime customer, I'm going to give you a mortgage for my prime rate of 3.25%. I don't know if anybody gets mortgages for 3.25%, but let's imagine, again, worst case scenario is 3.25%. So she's going to go borrow 3.25% from the bank. He says, you're in luck, I've got $120,000 I can lend. So she borrows it from it, she gets that house she wants, she gets a deed on that, and the bank takes a mortgage against that piece of property. So now she owes the bank $120,000, the bank owes the Federal Reserve $120,000, and the bank owes the depositor $10,000. Everybody see that? Now everything's great, right? How much money is the bank making off of her mortgage? 3%. There you go. They're paying 1/4 and they're charging 3.25. So on an annualized basis, they're making 3% on what?
120.
Nothing. Right. $120,000. Right. So the money they borrowed from the Federal Reserve. So now everything's going great as long as Lauren continues to pay her mortgage. But something happens one day. Life happens and she can no longer continue to pay her mortgage. So she goes back to the bank and says, listen, I can't pay this anymore. You can have your deed back. You can have your mortgage back. You can have your house back. You can have your keys back. I'm done. I'm out. I'm through. So she leaves and leaves the bank holding the bag. Now, my question at this time, is does the local bank still owe the Federal Reserve $120,000? Yes. Does the local bank still owe the bank depositor $10,000? Yes. So that's why a year ago now you saw the insurance rates being raised to try to keep everyone from pulling their money out of the local banks so they can continue to lend, because banks are in the lending business, right? Right. Thank you guys. There's just a quick example to show you how it works. Now, in addition to that, that local bank not only owes those in the Federal Reserve and that depositor his money back, but he actually had to go through the process of foreclosure. Foreclosure Takes about 9 months on average per property. And it costs that bank about $25,000 in legal fees and time that it has to wait. Real cash out of its pocket. Now remember, it loaned that money, leveraged by someone else's money. But now it's caught having to spend that cash. So it has to spend the cash to acquire the property back. And now every time it spends $1 to do so, it loses the ability to borrow 12 times that amount and loan that out. So lending becomes paralyzed. That's exactly what's happened. You've got to remember that banks are in the lending business, not in the real estate business. They do not want your properties. The Federal Reserve does not accept real estate as a form of payment. The bank can't go to the Federal Reserve and say, hey, here's all these houses we've got. And they say, no. We loaned you money. We want the paper back. We gave you paper. We want paper back. So lending becomes paralyzed because individual banking institutions they have depleted their cash and they no longer have the liquidity to pledge to get money on lines of credit from the Federal Reserve to loan out. So lending becomes paralyzed. So now a bank, what must it do? It's got all of these properties. And here's the thing to note, that these properties, when they were a mortgage, so let me ask you this. Through the foreclosure process, what happens to the mortgage on a house? It goes away, right? So it goes away. So the only thing that now the bank had the property, the borrower, Lauren, had the property, and the bank had the mortgage. Through the foreclosure process where they had to spend 25 grand of their own cash, number one, that's a bad thing. They also have to take back the property, but they have to give up what? Their mortgage. So they lose their paper. So the mortgage went on their asset side of their balance sheet. Does everybody see that? It's a good thing. Remember, they're making 3 points. A 3-point spread they were making annually on that loan per house, if it was a 3 1/4. So they have to give that up. They lose that asset, and they gain a piece of real estate. Do you think that goes on the asset or the liability side of the balance sheet? It's absolutely, positively a liability. If you're a bank and you own real estate, an REO, it's a liability. It is not an asset. It is not a good thing. If you had their job, let me ask you this way. If you had their gig and you could write paper out of thin air and make money off of it, or a spread off of it, or you had to actually do stuff and spend money and spend cash and be liable for something like a hard asset like real estate, which one would you rather be? Which one would you rather be? The bank. So let me ask you this. Would you rather be the bank or would you rather be a person in real estate? For real? Okay, you'd rather be a bank than a person that's in the real estate, right? If you had the option to do so. So that's what we're going to do for the next little bit, is think like bankers, not necessarily like real estate folks. So now these banks need to sell these properties as quickly as they can for as much as they can. Does that make sense? They've got this liability on their balance sheet. They want rid of it so they can get back what? Cash, so they can start doing what? Lending again, because that's what banks do. So they try to sell those properties. They try to sell them through local realtors. They try to sell them through the multiple listing service. They even list them up for auctions. You guys, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. We used to talk about this when everybody looked at us and go, that isn't not real. Now, everybody believes that this is real because you hear about it every day. So you watch this happen, this process happen. Now, what we do is we come in when the banks can no longer sell those properties. We make deals in bulk with those banks, and that's what Pinnacle Property Solution does, is buy those properties from banks, institutions, in bulk. So let me tell you a little bit about the bulk buying process and how that works. Bulk simply means it could be 10 properties, it could be 1,000 properties, it could be 300 properties, it could be 50 properties. It's simply more than one property. And here's the biggest thing about bulk transactions. Everyone thinks they know, and as Jay alluded to in the beginning, it's not as easy as it sounds, and people think that it is. But the difference, the main primary difference in bulk buying is when you're buying traditional real estate, you are usually a what? Person, right? Buying from who?
Another person.
Another person. It's person to person. It's a residential, retail, real estate transaction. It's usually person to person. Sometimes it's a company. You own a company, you own a bunch of them, but you're still usually buying from a person or an individual. When it's a bulk arena and you're buying, it's a company having a contract, buying houses, tic-tacs, lumber, whatever. We have a contractual agreement with another institution. And remember, banks don't look at these things as we could be buying the mortgages on it, we could be buying the notes on it, we can be buying the properties themselves. There's a ton of stuff you can do. But it's a contractual agreement between companies. So